Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to the video on the channel. What we have for you today is our wildcard video into game week 18. And to be honest, if you wildcarded after having just unlimited transfers, you've either made some big mistakes or you maybe missed the deadline, didn't realize you had unlimited transfers, and you're trying to play catch up. Or you may be just interested in sort of seeing which players might work best for your team, looking for a bit of advice. So hopefully we can help you out. If you are new to the channel, please do subscribe. We are a small channel, so any support is greatly appreciated. And like the video if it's helped you out. So let's get into it. So we've got some teams to target initially, and we're going to start with Leeds. Now, as this video is going out, Leeds are yet to play in this game week, and there are still some teams still to play, but the deadline for this game week 18 is actually on Friday night. So there's only Thursday where there is no games for the Premier League. So we thought we'd get the video out and, obviously there's information which we don't have yet, but barring any massive injuries, I think the team should speak for itself and should stay pretty consistent up until the deadline. So anyway, talking about Leeds, they've got some pretty good fixtures, and whilst they're still to play Man City, I think from an attacking point of view, it may be viable. It's worth keeping an eye on someone like Patrick Bamford because the teams that they're playing, especially after Newcastle, for those 4 game weeks, have pretty leaky defences. Would I recommend getting in a Leeds defender? Probably not. But I think someone like Bamford is definitely worth keeping an eye on, especially if you want that differential target in your team. Next up, we've got West Ham. Now, I know they didn't get the result against Arsenal, but I think they are sort of, playing quite well without necessarily getting the results that they want so far. And they've got some good fixtures coming up in those next 4 game weeks. I think maybe getting a cheap defender in for your rotation is definitely worth an idea as an option. Next, we've got Liverpool. Now, they look pretty on it, especially in the game last night against Villa. Just signed Cody Gakpo as well, so it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. But I think someone like Salah, maybe even a Van Dijk as a cheapest sort of certain option into the defence, unless you want Allison as well, is really good. But I do like them from an attacking point of view. Be interesting to see what Gakpo's priced at. But I think someone like Salah, if you've got the funds, is definitely worth it. Or even Darwin Nunes. I know there's some people transferring him out, but I do think that he is getting returns. I think he's got something like 14 attacking returns in 20 games for Liverpool this season. Some of those have been off the bench as well. So he is getting returns, even though he might not be the most efficient player at the moment. Next, we've got Chelsea, and they've got a good double game week as well. Whilst it's Man City, I think the Fulham game could be good for them. The Nottingham Forest game as well. They're also yet to play, currently playing tonight against Bournemouth, I believe. And so hopefully they'll get good results. And someone like Reece James, if he is back to full fitness, I think people were just absolutely, desperate to get him in the teams at the start of the season. And I think he's someone that he could fit in as well. And whether it's Havertz or whether it's Aubameyang that starts up front, if Chelsea can perform a bit more consistently, I think maybe an attacker in your team could be, really good for you as well if you're looking to make up some ground. Depends where you are in the league, in your mini leagues, and where you want to go from here. I think if you want to sort of, gain ground and make up the difference to maybe a poor start to the season, you're going to have to take some risks and look for value where other people aren't. And finally, we've obviously got Man City. I think it goes without saying, you don't really need to know that they've not played Leeds yet tomorrow. But I think if they are, um, unless they're having loads of injuries or there's something really drastic and unexpected happens, they've also got 2 double game weeks coming up as well. So I think, if you have to kind of triple up on Man City, doesn't really matter who you get in. I think obviously you'll have Haaland. If you can afford it, get De Bruyne. I think, maybe even like a Foden, if you think he's going to play. I think you do need to get those Man City assets in your team pretty pronto, to be honest. So, teams to avoid, and we're going to start with Arsenal. And although they did well against West Ham in the second half, I do think it's a little bit inconsistent, and it's such a short sample size after the World Cup to see how they are really do once they're pushed. Having Jesus injured, if teams kind of take it to him for a full 90 minutes, because other than sort of Saka or Martinelli, I wouldn't double up on Arsenal at the moment. I think obviously they're winning the Premier League, and I think you do still have to have a player in. But I think I hear some people kind of saying you need to double, triple up on Arsenal. I'm kind of not leaning towards that. I think we just wait and see. The fixtures are tricky as well. And although they've got a double game week, one of those is against Man City. Um, you'd be able to see nearer the time on how the recent form's going. If they beat Newcastle, Spurs, and Man United, then you're going to want to get some more players on for those Everton and Brentford games. But I just think it's worth seeing how those players do in those fixtures before we go all in. Next, we've got Everton, and I would just stay away from Everton. The fixtures are not good. Even the cheap players like Anthony Gordon or Damari Gray or Dwight McNeil, those attacking players that were maybe bit thought of a bit more positively at the start of the season. I think if you get on them now, there's just better options elsewhere for the same price. Everton completely off form, and it's not looking good over there. Whether Frank Lampard will stay the course for a few more games remains to be seen. I would just stay away. Next, we've got Spurs, and I know they've got a double game week, but I don't really think that's a great double game week, to be honest. I think we're saying stay away from Spurs as a team. I think if you were going to get anyone in, you should get in Harry Kane. Um, to me, it's important to differentiate between individual players and the teams. I think Spurs defense, even the midfield, you would stay away from. But Kane as a player is always going to get goals. So whether you think he can score against Arsenal and Man City, he probably can. I think the double Man City matchup in the next few weeks doesn't help the case either. But I would say outside of Kane, just do not go anywhere near them really. Defensively, they did not look great against Brentford, and I know they were missing a couple of key players at the back, but even still, I think they've looked a bit hit and miss all season defensively, especially. Next, we've got Crystal Palace. Although they had two players sent off against Fulham, the fact that they're having two players sent off in 57 minutes kind of shows a bit of either ill discipline or lack of concentration and focus in the game to kind of manage that situation a bit better. So I think that may show some underlying problems there. And the fixtures are not good either. I think Tottenham, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Man United, I think you do well to find a tougher run of fixtures anywhere in the Premier League over that span of games. Finally, we've got Brighton, and although they're playing well, I don't think they'll be able to maintain it. I think it'll be interesting to see how they do against Arsenal, but you would expect them to lose against Arsenal and Liverpool there. Maybe once they get past Liverpool, you might look at them again, especially if they don't, get absolutely wiped out by those teams there. But I just don't really see the players that are scoring at the moment, like Lallana and March. They're not going to score consistently, so Brighton's maybe that team that if they are going to do well, the players maybe do well in patches, but they haven't got that consistent player that you think, oh yeah, and absolutely must get that player in. If you're looking for a cheap defender, maybe possibly on the rotation basis when they play Everton and Bournemouth. But other than that, I don't really see a need to get Brighton players in. So moving on to the team, and we're going to start with Ward in goal. Now, Leicester obviously a bit hit and miss, and Ward is in there as a 4 million goalkeeper to help enable the rest of the team value for this team. This team is currently ranked about, a million, maybe just over a million in your transfer funds. And there's a few exchanges you could make for cheaper options if you don't quite have that team value. But hopefully, people do have relatively good team value at the moment. So it's about coming in about 100.5 million this team. So onto the defence, and we've opted for the cheapest or cheaper Kyle Walker as opposed to Cancelo. I think Walker's pretty much guaranteed to play. Cancelo hasn't been giving loads of attacking returns so far this season, and I think it is the way into a Man City defence that is probably going to perform well. They kind of go into that machine approach where they just factory produce results. 2-0, 3-0 consistently. And I think that's going to happen in the near future. So I think you definitely want to get in a Man City defender, whether it's Walker or maybe someone like Stones, or if you can afford Cancelo. It's kind of up to personal preference. We've also gone for Reece James, and I think hopefully, he's playing tonight. And I think if he plays tonight and he lasts the 90 minutes, he's going to get absolutely panic bought into lots of teams. And for good reason as well, he offers a lot of attacking threat. And if Chelsea can start keeping clean sheets in the favourable run of fixtures, I think he can add to those bonus points as well. And then rounding out the defence, we've got Kieran Trippier. I think, you absolutely must get Trippier in at the moment. A clean sheet and an assist at the weekend. He's always good for that attacking threat. And if he does get an assist and a clean sheet, you're looking at double digits because he's probably going to be involved in those bonus points as well. also about 66% owned. So I think if you don't have him, you're going to get further adrift from the people around you because they probably will. Now into the midfield, and let's start with Saka here. I do think it's worth having an Arsenal player in your team, even though he's Arsenal maybe not the team to go double or triple up at the moment. I think if you can't afford Saka, maybe your team value is a little bit less than this team. You can always get Martinelli in as well. I think they're just as good as each other in a sense. I would say if you've got the funds to get Saka in, he's maybe just a bit more consistent, and he's on penalties as well. Did actually have a goal disallowed for marginal offside last night. They could easily have come away with 2 goals from there, and then maybe people would be thinking a bit more favourably to him over Martinelli. Got Mo Salah, goal and an assist. I think he is someone that is going to really benefit from having a break over the World Cup. Played quite a lot of football. I think if you have him in your team, it really kind of narrows that Liverpool market down a bit, and you've covered and hedged your bets for not having a Liverpool attacker by getting him in, because he again is also on penalties, and I think he could really hit the ground running in this run of games we've got after Christmas. In the middle, we've got Andreas, and yeah, we've got a 4.5, 4.6 midfielder starting, but it's because we've gone quite expensive elsewhere. And as you'll be able to see from the bench, this team is very heavy on the starting 11. Um, I do think Andreas is a good player, and at times before the Christmas break, I think he's someone that you could absolutely have justified starting in your starting 11 anyway. So I don't really see why the need for that has changed. Fulham look like they're playing well, and they look like they know what they're doing. De Bruyne, again, we talked about having, that double, triple Man City players. I think De Bruyne is someone that is rotation proof. I think he's someone that is going to play consistently well, and he's on form at the moment. And I think he's going to really start dictating play as Man City are going to start trying to narrow down that gap between themselves and Arsenal. They've got the experienced players and they know how to do it. So I think if they do manage that, he's surely going to be involved in so many attacking points. Rounding out the midfield, we've got Rashford. I think Man United's fixtures look pretty good as well. They are playing tonight against Nottingham Forest, so that could all change. But there are different players at that price range that you could get in to replace him. But I do think he is someone that played very well at the World Cup and was finding his feet a bit more. Um, before the World Cup break. I think he's getting his confidence back and he's starting to run at players a bit more. And I think that sort of directness that you get from him is definitely worth it. And throughout the midfield here, we've really kind of spread our players to kind of cover a lot of good teams. We've not necessarily lumping on all on one team, but I think these players are all good contributors for the respective teams. Into the midfield, and we've got Mitrovic. Now, double Fulham, I think, why not? Mitrovic, goal and 2 assists at the weekend. Southampton up next. I think he's someone that you could absolutely play week in, week out. He's shown he can do it against small teams, shown he can do it against big teams. And I think at the end of the day, you've kind of just got to get on the Mitrovic bandwagon. Whether he's carrying an injury or not doesn't appear to matter. He is shown in the Championship and in previous seasons that he can play a lot of games and still perform consistently. So that shouldn't really put you off getting him in. And we've obviously got Haaland as well, who you've automatically put the captain's armband on because everyone else is doing that, and you don't want to lose out on those points. It depends as it gets closer to the end of the season. I think maybe you do need to, if you're looking to gain rank, take a few risks. But it was so negative, had such a negative impact on people's teams before Christmas. If you didn't captain him, that I think people are definitely going to captain him until he goes really off the boil. I think the downside of missing out on those points is just too great, which you might think is a negative effect on how you play fantasy league, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, teams are going to have to figure out ways in which to stop him. So onto the bench, and we've got a lot of cheap players on the bench here. And I don't really mind that. I think as we look at our top tips here, I think you need to they kind of link together, navigate through double game weeks, and plan your transfers. You've got to keep an eye out for double game weeks. There's certain games coming up, especially in the FA Cup, where and there's still games to be planned in as well, where teams are going to start having double game weeks and planning your transfers. Whilst you're wild carding here, or you may be looking at certain players coming in, you might say, oh, Mitrovic or somebody else, maybe they don't have the fixtures in a few weeks. use your transfers, roll a transfer 1 week, and then use two transfers to momentarily take out a couple of players for players that have double game weeks in that next game week or in a couple of game weeks, and then you can always just swap them back again. I think whilst it's not always the most efficient way of doing it, if you plan your transfers, it saves on taking hit points, and you will see a lot of people taking hits on their fantasy league teams. Probably a lot of people who have channels like myself. I've never been a big fan of taking hits. I think if you can plan effectively and thinking, right, well, this team's got a double game week here, and I'm half looking at moving this player to this player. Obviously, people might get injured and things might change, but I think if you've got that initial plan in place, it stops you from panicking. Even if you have to sort of write it down and look to see if it works, these players that you might want to get in the future, I think it just helps to kind of plan ahead and look at those double game weeks, and then also be aware of who might be having a double game week if a certain thing happens. I think it's just can't hurt, can it? Okay. So that's our wildcard team. Hopefully, it's helped you out with these players. I think if all the players in the team in the starting 11, um, I think they can all perform, and it's meant we've had a bit of a thinner bench. But let's face it, you never use your last bench player anyway, and you very rarely get into your second bench player. And I think if you've got someone that plays, I think both Patterson and Bueno, they're both playing at the moment. I think that can tide you over if any of your starting 11 um, don't play. You can still get at least 1 or 2 points coming off your bench just to keep it ticking over until the next game week. So let me know what you think. Thank you very much for listening. Like and subscribe to the videos. Appreciate all the support we can get. And I'll see you in the next one.